All right, everyone. Hello. Today we are going to move our attention from Africa over to the Americas and see what's going on in both North America and South America. We're going to look at the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca civilizations. So you have some guided notes that you are going to be taking as you go through, and you'll see those on Classcraft and below this video link here. There are some sections where it's just fill in the blank, and those will either be fill in the blank based off of what's on the slide or things that I say. So make sure you're kind of paying attention there. Sometimes it'll say explained. That asks you, okay, explain what you see. Don't just type exactly what's on the slide or what I said. Explain these things in your own words. So the first area that we're going to talk about is Mesoamerica here. And what Mesoamerica means is it's Mexico and Central America. So you see Mexico here down through Central America leading to South America. That's where Mesoamerica is defined as. And some of the greatest civilizations in the Americas, and quite frankly, some of the greatest civilizations in the world developed in Mesoamerica. The Maya, you can see listed there in the green. The Aztec, you can see listed there in the orange. They all live and thrive in the Mesoamerican region. We're going to dive into each of these as we go along. As a reminder, you can pause this video if I'm ever going too fast for you or whatever. That's the benefit of having this in a video format, is you can pause me. In person, I don't like to be paused. So I just kind of ramble here. You can stop me whenever you'd like, and I will not take any offense to it because I won't know. So the question is, ooh, Mr. Smith, you did a poor job lining up that text at the top of the text box. Tisk, tisk. The question is, how did they get here? So we talk about people originating in Africa or originating in areas in the Middle East. How did they get here? How do we get to these Americas, which are quite frankly all by themselves? Well, there's a couple different theories. Theory number one is the Bering Land Bridge. And that is the idea that there actually used to be land here that would connect Siberia, so kind of the northeast section of Russia, to Alaska. That there used to be land here, a connection. And now we can see that there's definitely a disconnect in modern times, but in past times, perhaps there was a land bridge where people were able to simply walk across and then make their way down into the Americas. So that being theory number one. Theory number two is coastal migration. And what do we mean by that? Well, quite frankly, crossing the seas. Most likely the Pacific Ocean, and settling along the western coast of of the Americas. So moving along and via boat. Now these boats here are not the boats that we are typically going to talk about when we get to Europe. We're going to start talking about ships there. And there is a difference between a ship and a boat. In this case, they're made out of papyrus, very thin materials, things that you would not want to be trying to sail across the seas in. But they likely got in these boats. We're going to see some stuff next week here, or in the next couple days, depending on when you're watching this. Some evidence that may suggest that this could be the case. So let's look at the first group that we're going to talk about, the Mayans. So the Maya are settling on the Yucatan Peninsula in Central America. Yucatan Peninsula is this part of Central America where it juts out right here, is known as the Yucatan Peninsula. So the Maya, they were not an empire and not united politically. We more use this phrase to talk about a group of people and a group of peoples, plural. Yes, peoples, plural, where it's different groups. They're all city-states, which are kind of their independent little groups. Now, the Maya is talking about a collective region of people. So each city-state is going to have its own ruler. There's no real collective identity. The Mayas don't think of themselves as one group, right? It's just kind of a regional group where there's not a specific emperor. There's no real united political front. It's just a bunch of city-states all collected together. As you can see here, these different diamonds all show some of these different city-states all throughout that Yucatan Peninsula, going into the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. As an aside, Caribbean Sea, we call this area the Caribbean. It'd be weird if you called it Pirates of the Caribbean, though. No one calls it Pirates of the Caribbean. It's always Pirates of the Caribbean. But it would also be weird if you said you were going to go on a cruise to the Caribbean. So, not really sure why it's one way in one thing and one way in another, but there's a little ramble from me that has nothing to do with anything. Tangent. So even though they are these different groups of people, there are still common threads that we can pull from and make claims about. For example, they build these giant temples and palaces. Atop the temples, these priests were performing religious ceremonies and sacrifices. We will get into sacrifices in a little bit. So they have ceremonial platforms where they can do these things. There are temples, pyramids, observatories where they can watch the skies, ball courts. Yes, a lot of sport was played in the Maya region, but they are building all of this great architecture. Here's some examples of the pyramids, many of which are still standing today. Ball courts down here in the bottom. So Mayan religion, they were polytheistic. And you're going to see that a number of times. What polytheistic means, poly meaning multiple, theos meaning God. So they had multiple gods. Whereas the Christian faith would be monotheistic because there is one God. The Hindu faith, for example, would be polytheistic because there are multiple gods. The Mayan did practice human sacrifice. That's always fun to talk about. We'll dive into this a little bit more in the coming days because it's too fun of a topic to completely avoid. But we'll talk about some numbers in a little bit, and it's going to get scary. Where they are thinking, okay, we need to sacrifice people in order to bring power and pleasure to our gods. The Maya did create a writing system of hieroglyphics. So we often talk about this with Egypt, but there was a new writing system in the Mayas as well, based on imagery. You can see some examples of that below. They create a set of numerals so they can start counting and organizing. They also develop a 365-day calendar. This has been cause a number of times for worldwide panic and fear, most notably and most recently in 2012 when it was thought that the Mayan calendar ended and that this would bring about the end of the world. This would signify the end of the world. That was in 2012. 2020, we're still standing. There's some rumors that in 2021, that's the real end of the Mayan calendar. It seems like every time we pass one, they're like, oh, we found a little bit more calendar and it'll actually end later. So who knows? We could be living our last year on Earth. I mean, it is 2020, so who knows if the world is ending. It feels like it is, but I don't know if the Maya calendar has anything to do with that. So what happened to the Maya? Many of the Maya abandoned their cities around 900 AD. I'm going to give you the worst answer possible. We pretty much don't know why the civilization all of a sudden declined. There's a theory that around 900 AD that there was a severe drought and a lot of people died due to starvation and others migrated away from here to try and find land that was more fertile and they could grow food and survive. But the sad answer is really we don't know why the civilization declined. The Maya still exist today in terms of the regional people that we discussed, where there are more than 2 million people, Mayan people living in Guatemala and southern Mexico today. So that's the Maya. Moving on to the Aztecs. The Aztecs live in what is known as the Valley of Mexico in central Mexico. You can see it listed there on the green portion. Tenochtitlan. 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 There we go. Tenochtitlan. Yep. That's pretty much it. Depending on who you listen to, you will hear a different pronunciation. I practiced for a long time leading up to this video, and look what happened. T-Town was the capital city of the Aztec Empire, and you can see it there in that image, and you are probably thinking to yourself, that looks like it's out in the middle of the water. It is, and here's the reason why. The legend of T-Town. The gods told the Aztecs to search for an eagle holding a snake in its beak perched atop a cactus. And that is where they were to build their capital city. The Aztecs found this. This image actually has a bird in its beak, but it is a snake, as you will see in just a moment. They saw this sign on a swampy island in the lake Texcoco. You may be thinking to yourself, this image looks slightly familiar. The modern-day Mexican flag maintains this imagery. Eagle, snake, cactus. The Aztecs saw this on their swampy island in the lake, and this is where they would build their city. There are still monuments to this today. Eagle, snake, cactus. So it was built on an island, and it was connected to the mainland by causeways, so strips of land or strips of wood leading north, south, and west, so that way they could get to the mainland. There was a series of canals laced across the city. That way everything would be accessible by either foot or by canoe. Today, this is Mexico City. The swamp has been drained. It was actually drained by the Spanish, and we will talk about that when we talk about European exploration. But now it is where Mexico City stands. So in terms of government, the Aztecs created an empire through conquest. Conquest meaning going and taking over and tearing down people and taking over. The conquered people and local rulers had to pay tribute to the Aztecs. And what tribute means is you are giving gifts or money to the Aztec Empire in exchange for not killing you further. The Aztecs had an emperor, but his job was to lead in war. Basically, the Aztec is kind of a war-based society, and the empire or the emperor's job is to continue to expand that empire. Again, the Aztecs were polytheistic. Poly, meaning many. Theos, meaning God, multiple gods. Huitzilopochtli. Huitzilopochtli. And this time I was smart and left myself some pronunciation. He was the main Aztec god. And they built these massive temples and pyramids dedicated to their gods. Imagery such as this was common with the Aztec gods. So you have pyramids of the sun, pyramids of the moon, all sorts of pyramids designed to bring good favor to the people here. Human sacrifice was a common practice of the Aztecs as well. And an example here, one of the pyramids, when they needed to bring back faith to the pyramids, they sacrificed 84,400 prisoners over the course of 4 days. 84,000 people over the course of 4 days. And the idea was, even further, if we want the sun to rise each day, it needs strength. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to sacrifice humans to give them strength. Is it worth trading somebody to have the sun rise in the day? Yeah. I mean, if the sun starts not rising, I may start looking around our classroom and thinking, all right, who can we sacrifice, both literally and figuratively, to get that sun coming back up? Who knows? Maybe that's a response to COVID. So what happened to the Aztecs? Well, conquistadors, led by Hernan Cortez, will defeat the Aztecs in 1521. We will talk about this more when we talk about the Europeans coming and taking over. Last but not least, we need to focus on the Incas. Now, the Incas, we have moved from Mexico. So you saw here, Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula. We've now moved down to South America, the Andes mountain region of South America. This is in modern-day Peru. The Incan Empire is in modern-day Peru. Peru stretches along the west coast of South America. So the Sapa Inca was the emperor. They had absolute power. And the Sapa Inca claimed to be the son of the sun. First of all, if you're the son of the sun, yeah, people are probably going to follow you, right? That's a pretty impressive title. I do want you to remember this son of the sun for when we start looking at monarchs in Europe, because there is going to be a god who claims himself to be the Sun King, or a king who claims himself to be the Sun King. So just keep this in mind. The emperor here is serving as the religious leader, and the empire is divided in a number of regions with the capital at Cusco. Cusco, not Emperor Cusco from Emperor's New Groove, but we're in the same ballpark. So in order to unite the empire, the Incas had to build massive road networks through mountains. You can see it here. They had to cut in these roads. They had to build passageways across gorges, across rivers. They were doing a lot to build networks so they could travel through these areas. This is not super important and it's not on your note-taking sheet, but I think it is very, very impressive. If you're familiar with building tactics at all, often when you see bricks, for example, there's mortars, a layer of almost like a cement that keeps everything and fits everything together. The Incas used stone temples without using any mortars. But their stones fit so well together, they cut them so precisely that not even a knife can fit in between the stones. That is extremely, extremely impressive, and it's an engineering marvel. Polytheistic, again, their primary god, Inti, the sun god. And you may be thinking to yourself, why is it so much importance on the sun? Keep in mind, the sun brings light, warmth. It brings the ability for food to grow. Really, life does not exist for multiple reasons without the sun. So you want to keep the sun happy. Incas believed in reincarnation, meaning once you died, you come back to life in some other form. They also practiced cranial deformation, and the Mayans did this as well, but the Incas really did it. And cranial deformation, you see in the images there, this sounds insane, but it is altering the shape of the cranium, the head, by wrapping tight cloth straps around the head of the newborn. That way, when the skulls are still soft and growing, instead of it being round, they grow into this cone-like shape. And you may be wondering to yourself, why would they do this? Short answer, we don't know. We have a couple theories. One theory is it was more aesthetically pleasing and it helped show which group you were a member of. So we don't really know. I know back in the 80s, this was kind of a thing where women who used to have the super tall hair said the higher the hair, the closer to God. Maybe that's a type of thing. Who knows? There's a number of theories, but there's no real proven reason why. But we can just admit it looks pretty weird. This is mind-blowing, but the same people who did this had some medical advances. They had successful skull surgery. You'd probably need skull surgery after this. They also used medicines to make patients unconscious during surgery. Anesthetics, basically. So this blew my mind. The fact that people who were doing stuff like this were still having medical advances. There was strict organization in the society where each family in the community was assigned a specific job. It's division of labor. We are breaking things up. That way it's more efficient and everything's getting done. Government officials are arranging marriages for people. That way we can continue to put families together as we want. And they're organizing mandatory public service building projects where you have to contribute to the public good by helping to build these things. So the system is extremely organized in order to be efficient. What happened to the Inca? Well, I'm going to propose a few things first, and then I'll talk about the real reason. Number one, civil war in the empire broke out. There was various groups vying for the leadership. So that's part one. And part two, smallpox spread. A disease spread, killing much of the Incan Empire. But the real reason, again, Spanish conquistadors. This case, Francisco Pizarro. We're going to talk more about him. He leads to a common saying that we've actually heard. He's what brought about the fall of the Incan Empire. So it's, again, Europeans coming in and taking people out. So that concludes our discussion. There are a few final questions for you to fill in there on the document. But I hope this was a nice overview for you. Again, you can pause, rewind, whatever you need to do if you go back and miss any information. We will continue to look over these over the coming days. Thank you very much, and see you soon.